we have wide range of environmental, social, governance issues, and where, we cannot ignore as well.
That was a short snippet from this week's episode. Stay tuned for the full conversation. Hello and welcome back to yet another episode on the Mission Shunya podcast. First things first, I hope you're doing well. I'm continuing to get a lot of feedback on episode 100, the video podcast. Special thanks to all the listeners who are sending in their suggestions for upcoming podcast episodes, guest recommendations, and a lot more. You can drop a note at missionshunya@gmail.com or you can tag Mission Shunya across the social media handles. I'll definitely take your feedback and make the show better. And there is a new design language for the cover arts. And just like the video, I have to thank my friends at Terra Generation for their support. They are a content agency specialized in telling stories in climate, biodiversity, and sustainability. You can connect with them through the link in the description of this episode. Now, back to the mini-series. On the last episode, we covered the basics of ESG, the buzzword in the sustainability space, especially among the business community. As promised, the second episode is even more interesting. It will cover all things related to ESG for businesses, and as usual, we have someone who is right in the middle of all this. Before that, I have to mention, I have known Tomoo Machiba for quite some time now, but I wanted to pick his brains at this point because he is associated closely with ESG. So what exactly does he do?
I joined the company called Zeroboard last August, and I'm currently managing director of the Zeroboard Research Institute and a part of this company. My job is basically, promoting how kind of international field is moving and in this ESG areas, but also that information feeding into the new kind of digital development. And Zeroboard is also helping company and to ease the GHG accounting, but also ESG data collection and management.
So what is the core vision of Zeroboard?
Yes, Zeroboard itself was established just 3 years ago as a venture company. And company itself is basically, making climate change actually more positive for the corporate future. And main services, basically providing the software services and for accounting greenhouse gas emissions for each company. But also we are extending our service into including wide range of ESG accounting also.
So accounting for greenhouse gas emissions has been something that is easily tangible at the outset. But how challenging is it to kind of have good greenhouse gas accounting practices?
Yes, and GHG accounting, it's basically we have scope 1, and 2, and 3. And mainly scope 1, 2 is about emissions from your own premises. Then scope 3 is anything outside.
Correct.
And accounting scope 1 and 2 is relatively clear as far as you have good emission factors from the fuels and electricity and gas and which you are using. But it's anything beyond. And it's included in the scope 3 is pretty much more difficult, starting from the defining the boundaries, then, where to collect the data and which emission factors should be applied and so on and so forth, which is not necessarily straightforward. But it's, accounting scope 3 is becoming, increasingly important because of, just reducing your own, emissions within your own boundary which might, passing the emission to the other people. Or, like might be your own emission is pretty small, but actually the product, you are selling or, people are using might be, more emissions coming from the use stage, for instance, or might be emission coming from the more mining and extracting stage as well. So that's why, GHG protocol, this is international standard for GHG accounting. It's start requiring this scope 3 emission accounting.
So GHG accounting is a core part when we look at the environmental accounting of the ESG as well, right?
Yes. And basically, like recently this IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, and issued new sustainability disclosure standards. Then where it's requiring the, GHG accounting, even including the scope 3. That's why people focusing on, GHG accounting so much. But GHG, it's basically climate change is pretty much, the most important issue. That's why people focus on this GHG accounting. But also, we have wide range of environmental, social, governance issues, and where, we cannot ignore as well.
That is true. So as a company, when you look at each component, environmental, social, and governance, how do you help businesses kind of define their targets and help them kind of achieve that?
Yes, we have, several kind of standards of understanding ESG performance. Also, like many major company and evaluated by this ESG rating agencies, and they have, setting up their own, standards for measuring ESG performance. But its main, standards would be Global Reporting Initiative standards, where they have wide range of ESG issues and providing the different performance indicators, how to understand the issue, but also, how to measure the performance, especially for the disclosure.
Individually, I also understand there are standards that are evolving. So does it make like the entire space of ESG accounting and ESG monitoring a little more difficult because different standards are coming up? There is, as far as I understand, there is no rationalization of a common standard protocol across geographies.
In terms of disclosure, the standard itself is quite merging, right? It's now IFRS issued the International Sustainability Disclosure Standards. And then European, also they started this CSRD and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which provide also environmental, it's European Sustainability Reporting Standards called the ESRS, which is more or less based on GRI standards. So it's basically internationally, how to understand or measure ESG performance and how to disclose. It's quite merging in a sense.
I also understand, like you mentioned about Europe, and recently with the regulations where carbon border adjustment frameworks, all this coming up, it's going to be a little more complicated, right? So in the global world, where do you account carbon? Where does the scope end for one player, and where does it start for the supplier? So how do you think this will kind of evolve in the years to come?
Yeah, I think it's, people might be thinking, this carbon border adjustment, CBAM regulations as a new burden. But same time, that's kind of, standardizing how to understand value chain, GHG accounting and measuring the, carbon footprinting. And also, not only CBAM and Europe having a new regulation on batteries and also expanding into the different product area and the future basically, like products and selling in Europe and have to provide so-called digital passport, which is including all the, supply chain, environmental, social information in the products in a digital manner. So in a sense, it's, really you require lots of data on like environmental performance and also labor and the human rights, due diligence issues. And that's kind of, quite burdensome, but same time how, like pretty much streamlining and how we kind of, getting data and presenting data and universal. That's where, in the coming like decades and the transparency of the supply chain will be increasing. But same time, the way we, collect data and present the data will be kind of, harmonized globally.
That's interesting. And yeah, as you rightly said, the battery passport is something that is really taking shape, and a lot of players, including automotive players, are kind of adapting to that. So that is really good. Now, when we look at accounting, something about the social side of ESG, it is more a subjective than quantitative accounting. So how does a company like Zeroboard kind of help businesses in kind of defining their social objectives, helping them achieve that? So how do you think is a good way to kind of address this challenge?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's even, you see the GRI standards and the many social issues. It's like, might be little less quantitative and in terms of account, interest is quite increasing and, in Asia as well and in my country, Japan. And, we start realizing, like gender equality is quite important issue in the labor force. And also we need to reduce the, different type of harassment. But also we start kind of understanding how, like employees, it's quite important. It's especially in my country, like, after COVID and, getting quality employees becoming difficult and, company, fighting each other to get, good, new stuff. And, so that now, apart from environment, and many Japanese companies is quite keen on understanding, human capital and the management. Which we have international standards called ISO 30414. And so Zeroboard also, start expanding from the GHG accounting into the, more wider ESG areas. But we are kind of aiming to start with these human capital areas, which kind of, which we have many companies having interest in understanding and also leveraging, human capital for the, more making people stay longer and making people happy in the company and also, raising the productivity within it.
That's good to know. And coming finally to the governance side of things, different regions, as you said, Japan probably is a pioneer in kind of adopting all this, but there are countries, regions which kind of can't adopt all this at once. How do you think the governance side playing across geographies, maybe Europe and say advanced countries are ahead in terms of adopting good governance practices? But for example, in some regions in US, some states in US are kind of resisting the transition to kind of having more accounting and governance. So how do you think the governance angle playing out?
Yes, governance is kind of based on each kind of jurisdiction's history, let's say. So, Japan used to be governance was pretty much internal, and now, international pressure requiring we should have more external board members and also over, seeing the committees and so on and so forth. But, we have also international standards such as, G20 OECD principles of corporate governance. And also we have ISO standards called ISO 37,000 series, which provide, basically universal framework of, how accountable corporate governance. But increasingly in terms of climate change and other environmental social risks we are thinking, and then the investors' interest is how, each company can respond quickly and properly to the such, potential risks, and also how to cope with and when, things really happen, so that investors can protect their own, the investment, let's say. So wherever, your company locates, and India or other part of the world, as far as you have international investors, then you have to be very conscious about how to improve the corporate governance and to respond to the such requirement on potential risks. Might be a little different for the, your stakeholders, investors, only, domestic, entities. But as far as you have, foreign investments, then, the corporate governance have to be, aiming for more, transparent and, or fit to the international standards.
Fair. Since you deal with a lot of companies, there is this general perception when something new comes like this, like ESG framework. Does it have to be that only the big companies, big businesses have to get started with this? Or do you feel that there are a lot of benefits for even small and medium-sized enterprises to kind of adopt these practices? So what is your opinion on this?
Yes, I think with smaller company is getting pressure from the, bigger companies as part of the supply chain, so that they have to kind of provide data for instance, GHG Scope 3 accounting, and also information about, human rights due diligence, for instance. But same time, in the future, really you have to think how your company can survive in the long-term future, and then how can benefit from the, such changes. Anyway, the world is changing, and the global warming is quite becoming serious issue. So that next, several years is critical years, and you get a lot of pressure to meet the 1.5 degree targets. So you cannot, if you don't take any actions, then just you left behind, and your business might be, quite damaged, and because of this. So you shouldn't think this is not only for the big companies, and more pressure coming to the smaller companies. But same time, tackling with environmental social issues might create, potential benefit for the companies. For instance, like saving energy cost. Same time, you reduce the GHG emissions, but also making your employees happy and creating more productive labor force, and making higher profit because of this. So it's maybe benefit is longer term than, short term financial gains, but you better think, you cannot just live within kind of financial field and thinking about only profit and every day, and you have to think more widely and how your company can survive in the, next decades.
That
Thinking
is true.
about how the world is changing.
Correct. Couple of points that I really like. Change is the only constant, and the companies have to adapt to this. Now, that leads me to my final question. A lot of what you do at Zeroboard involves technology. So how is technology an enabler to kind of help businesses adopt ESG faster, better? How is technology playing a key part in the entire ESG adoption?
I think it's many companies quite, flooded by lot of requests from the, this rating agencies and the disclosure requirement and different standards and so on and so forth. And as far as you do, cope with this request by manual labor, then you just spend whole your time for doing this, and not really spending time for the improving your performance. So digitalization can help to kind of reduce your burden for the kind of data collection and disclosure requirements, but more like, you gain the time for the think and improve your own performance and more like, real tangible work and which you have to do.
That was a wrap on the second part around ESG. As Tomo mentioned, while there is a lot of emphasis for companies to adopt ESG frameworks, the entire transition is still a work in progress. But the good part is, with the right technology adoption like how Zeroboard does, companies can actually do a lot more, lay out a roadmap to get to net zero and beyond. Most importantly, the adoption of ESG is just not for the big companies. Even small businesses and every organizations can get involved. So on that note, we'll wrap up the conversation for this episode. Next episode will be coming to you very soon. And if you are a keen observer of climate activism, you'll definitely like it. So stay tuned. So with that, this is Girish Shivakumar signing off. And as always, thank you for listening.